Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series and beyond. I am your host, constant reader Scott Daly, and I'm joined, as always, by the mouthless man talking through a horse. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
The horse does have a hard time talking into the microphone, but generally it turns out okay. I've been talking to you through a horse the whole time. I mean, I think
for 5 years, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know that. I don't know if the listeners know that.
Yeah, that's actually why we don't do a video podcast, is we just felt like it would be really confusing for people. I feel like we can start now that everyone has read Fairy Tale and gotten to this part of the book. They might finally understand the situation we're working with here, to where we can finally have like a big face reveal.
Yeah,
on the podcast.
Horse face reveal.
Face, yeah. This week on the show, Fairy Tale continues as we discuss chapters 11 through 14 of the novel. Charlie heads into the magical world of Empis, which features a shoe lady, a goose girl, and a horrible curse that only he can break. I mean, probably, right? I'm just guessing at this point.
Maybe not.
Matt, what did you think of this week's reading?
So we finally get some fairy tale adventure. It's a little dark. It's a little mysterious. We're worried about all kinds of things. Pretty into this book. Pretty worried about Charlie and his dad. What do you think? Where are you at?
I'm extremely worried about Charlie's dad. I've never been more worried about anything in my entire life. This is the first time in the history of the show that the king has done the king thing he does, and I don't know what's going to happen already. And it's driving me insane. But no, yeah. I'm really into this so far. Yeah, I think if you go back and listen to last week's episode, I think you see our patience wearing thin towards crossing into the realm of fairy. And so it's very fortunate that we pretty quickly this week, at least take a quick trip to the magical world, and then by the end of the chapters have fully dived in. Divin. So I'm liking it. I'm enjoying what we're doing with it. There's a lot of meta stuff going on, which I don't know why I didn't expect, but in retrospect seems pretty obvious that we're not just going to tell a fairy tale, but we're going to tell a story about the concept of fairy tales, which it seems like we're doing. So I'm pretty into everything that's happening this week. Lots of fun stuff. Lots of going to Google and seeing if this is a reference to something, I think.
I also feel like I learned a lot this week about it. Like there were a lot of trailheads to sort of check up on and be
sure.
Like, well, I mean, just frankly, like one example, just to kind of lead us in, is like, I didn't really remember the Jack and the Beanstalk story that well. Like you think you know all these fairy tales from your childhood, and then you're like, so wait, then what happened? Like between him going up the beanstalk and him and the giant dying, like what is the story actually? And I just realized that I just didn't remember these things as well as I thought, which is, good to know, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. Like so many of these stories are things like Rumpelstiltskin is a story that I knew very, very well as a child. I think I had like a cartoon. I don't even know where from, but like there was a cartoon video cassette that I must have had that I watched over and over again, the story of Rumpelstiltskin. And I was really fascinated by it because it was a little scary. It was just a little bit scary, the story. And I was really fascinated by it. But I hadn't seen that in years. And a lot of what the story of Rumpelstiltskin was didn't recur to me until this week. And we get a quick summary of what that fairy tale is. So yeah, I mean, this has been fun. Part of me wonders what this would have been like if I had read it when I was younger, right? If I was a young kid, maybe 11, 12, 13, with the memory of these fairy tale stories that I was read to a lot as a kid, fresher in my mind. I wonder what my take on this whole thing would have been.
That's a really interesting thought. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I guess we should get into it, though. I'm really looking forward to this a whole bunch. I'm really loving this book. I really am. So I knew I was going to. I prefaced the whole series with my biases, but so far, I think this has been a great novel.
Me too. Really enjoying it.
Okay, before we get into the chapters this week, we did have one quick announcement. Did you folks know that we have another podcast? I bet you didn't, because we don't talk about it enough on here. We should, but we do not. Matt, we have another podcast. Did you know?
I forgot until this minute. But yeah, we do another weekly podcast, the Doofcast. You can find it on whatever device you're currently listening on. You probably already do. I know. But just in case you don't, I mean, right now we're doing a series that we're calling Deconstructing Apes, where we're going through all of the Planet of the Apes films in the order in which they were released, starting with the original in the 1960s and going up through the modern ones that are being released. I mean, I think one was released this year?
Yeah, last summer. Yep.
And we're more or less in the middle of that. And we're having a lot of fun with it. So we thought we'd mention it in case any of you hunger for some apes content.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you like what we do here on the show, if you haven't checked out the Doofcast yet, I think you will generally like what we do there. It is more movies and television focused, but still pretty good. So check that out. We are, I think this week's episode is diving into the first of the modern Apes reboots, the James Franco one. And so we've covered the 5 70s movies, and then we covered the ill-fated Tim Burton 2001 version, and now we're on to some of the really good ones. So I'm looking forward to it. I've been enjoying that series, and we think you will too. So check it out.
Yep.
All right, Matt, let's get into it. Chapter 11. That night, school days, Dad leaves the Well of the Worlds. The other, the old woman. A nasty surprise. That's a mouthful. There's a lot going on in this chapter. I think chapter 11 is the longest chapter of our 4 chapters this week, so it doesn't surprise me that it has a pretty lengthy title there. But let's get into it, Matt.
All right.
Our chapter begins with young Charlie reading Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury as his father informs him of his insurance retreat that will have him leave town for a few days later in the week. Matt, I thought I was being really clever when I laughed to myself about how this is such a standard fairy tale event. It's like, oh, we're right when the kid needs to travel, we are having his parent conveniently leave. And then the book just does that, right? King is 10 steps ahead of me, where he has his character just say, haha, this is such a standard fairy tale that my father happens to be leaving right when I want to travel to the other world. So once again, I think I'm being clever, and no, it's just the thing the book is textually doing.
Yeah, while also heavily hinting that something horrible will happen to his dad while he's on his trip. I mean, not just even hinting, I think it's straight up telling us. I think one thing I can do from my position as the one who never actually knows what's going to happen is, so let me put it this way. If you look back over the entirety of Kingslingers, every time King tells us something bad's going to happen to this character, I always have an urge to be like, but maybe this time it won't. And it always does. They always die. Always. But Scott, maybe this time it won't.
Oh, I'm afraid. I'm afraid I just don't believe that, Matt. I just really don't believe it. But maybe.
Yeah. There's always a chance. No, I'm pretty sure his father's dead. It's so one word that has not been brought up here yet in this book discussion is Ka. There is a lot of sort of Ka coloring around the idea that he's been swept up into this fairy tale adventure, and he's sort of being like the universe around him is sort of being pushed and prodded into a shape that gets him where it needs him, which is to go on this adventure and serve some role in this other world. That's kind of what it feels like to me, especially with this meta gesturing at the idea that, like, isn't it convenient that his father is being sent away?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, there's a lot of meta stuff going on here. I want to dive into that more specifically in a little bit, but I agree with you. This is very standard King stuff in every level of it, that it's operating specifically on the level that we're seeing here. And also that we're kind of examining the concept of fairy tales generally. It's just very classic King, I think.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about this line as Charlie is talking to his father about the retreat he's going on. He asks him, "Will there be drinking?" And his father replies, "There will, a lot, but not by me." And we haven't talked about this idea very much, Matt, because I don't think Charlie, at least in the narration of the book, has talked about this much, has centered on this very much. But this idea that exists that when you're living with an alcoholic parental figure like Charlie is, there is this kind of like constant fear spread over your life that they could relapse at any moment, that they could fall off the wagon. And Charlie lives with this fact. He lives with this constantly every day. And he doesn't talk about it very much. But we do see here this week that this becomes like a pretty huge part of his decision-making process once he's over in Giant Land, as you've called it. It in essence becomes one of the reasons for perhaps rejecting the call to adventure, right? Like the idea that if he goes missing, if he's gone for 6 days, as he's kind of reasoned out it's going to take, then it could cause his father to fall off the wagon. And he just carries this with him constantly. And it does shine a maybe not a different light, but a more focused light on who Charlie is as a person. Like, I think I've kind of constantly been trying to examine his behavior and find a core tenet of it. And this is, I think, another piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, definitely. I think it also reinforces our prior perspective that the reason for Charlie's, I think as we have cast it, excessive conscientiousness is largely due to his dad's failure to live up to this high standard that he sets for himself. I think in some regards it's admirable for him to have such a high standard, right? Like it's kind of a likable aspect that he is such a moral person, but also I worry that it's sort of brittle, it's sort of risky to live your life this way, because I think, in my opinion, it leads to a mindset, or it has led to a mindset with Charlie, where he kind of sees himself as, in some deep sense, like actually a bad kid because he got up to these shenanigans with his friend when he was younger. Yeah. This is something that we see over and over. So there's sort of, the reason I bring that up here is there's sort of like two parts to this thing. Part one is, yeah, he has these incredibly high personal standards that are a consequence of basically temporary, abandonment in the sense that his mother died, and abandonment in the sense that his father became totally unreliable, forcing him to take on the adult figure. But then that's such a high, such a I think unrealistic and unreasonable standard for himself that he can't live up to it, and then he sees himself in a negative light, and that I think is in the end, I think that's a destructive cycle to be stuck in. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a very clever way of framing it. I like that a lot. And it does help kind of explain something that we've called out every week, and I think we'll continue to call out again today, around his kind of incessant need to bring up this bad stuff that he did as a kid. Like, it feels like every moment, like when he's talking about Rumpelstiltskin, I'm sorry, not actually Rumpelstiltskin, but we're just going to call him that. When he's talking about Rumpelstiltskin, Christopher Polly, he basically is like, this guy's a murderer, but I bet he never called in a fake bomb threat at school, or like wrote a cuss word on a church sign. Uh-huh. It's like, no, yeah, but he killed someone though. Yeah. Like he did. Like, it is kind of hilarious to see him make this moral equivalency between this himself and this man that is a murderer, a scumbag, a actual criminal, not a wayward child that is trying to figure himself out. I think this stuff is really, really fascinating. It's on my mind a lot. I think there's also perhaps another reason for it that I think we'll get into in a little bit when we get to that particular section. I wanted to dive deeper into this, but no, I think you're spot on with this here.
Yeah, it's funny because I think I used to be like this, and I'm not anymore, because I think as you grow up, you get some perspective on yourself and you kind of go easy on yourself in some ways. But I think I used to be like, feel horrible guilt about all of my little, pissant, meaningless mistakes. So it's funny to me because at first this felt like weird. And then it suddenly clicked, and I was like, oh, this is that thing. This is that thing that I used to do too when I was not even a kid, just like a younger man.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't. I mean, I never did any bad things at all as a child, so I
Uh-huh.
can't relate whatsoever.
No,
But
I know. Yeah.
Matt, let's talk about Something Wicked This Way Comes for a moment here, right? So this is a book that I read years and years and years ago as a kid, and I remember loving it. Honestly, like I was thinking a lot about Ray Bradbury because between this book and The Martian Chronicles, I just have this really distinct memory of reading this book, both of these books, and being like, wait a minute, you can do this? Like you can do this in stories? This is cool. This is
Mhm.
really cool. I don't think I want to go into the book proper because I think typical to Stephen King, he references other literature, but when he does this, he makes it clear what the reference point is, what's the thing you need to care about. In this case, there is a carousel in Something Wicked This Way Comes, where if it is turned one way, time speeds up. If it is turned the other way, time goes in reverse, and that is being compared to the sundial that our main character is going to be heading to this week.
Yeah, I never read that. I never read Something Wicked This Way Comes. That's I didn't know that's even what it was about. Although the connection to this story makes it pretty obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have been thinking about Martian Chronicles lately, which I know is not what this book is about. But I just wanted to remark on like Ray Bradbury and his whole thing because, like you just said, he's very different. Martian Chronicles is very weird. And so, like, one weird thing about my encounter with Martian Chronicles is that I absolutely devoured it when I was like 10 or 11 years old. And in retrospect, I'm kind of like, why? Like, why did I love it so much? Because it has no plot, it has no characters, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't put it down.
Mm-hmm.
In retrospect, it seems inexplicable to me, but I remember loving it. I mean, I do love it. I haven't read it in a long time, but it's like this work of art that sort of exists off to the side of my otherwise coherent understanding of what novels are supposed to be like. Um, didn't mean to go on a whole diatribe there, but I think Bradbury is just a really interesting writer.
Yeah, I mean, I think Something Wicked This Way Comes, in comparison, serves as a much more traditional novel. But it's so funny how similar we are in so many ways, considering we didn't meet until college, because that is kind of my memory of my experience with the Martian Chronicles as well. I read it probably at around 10. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's a weird book. It's so strange, but it's strange in like all the ways that me as a young boy were like, I'm vibing with this so
Yeah.
much. Like I liked it. I liked it a lot. I need to reread it. It has been forever. I'm kind of scared to reread it because I feel like the jaded 39-year-old version of myself is just like, this isn't anything special. But maybe not. Maybe I need to give Mr. Bradbury a little bit more credit than that.
Yeah, I think I am going to reread it, honestly. It's a fix-up novel. That's one thing. That's one thing that's weird about it. It's a
Mhm.
sort of a fix-up novel out of his short stories. So you kind of
Yeah,
have
yeah,
to go into that with that expectation. But as a 10-year-old, I didn't even know what a fix-up novel was. So
yeah, sure. Matt, I wanted to talk to you about this. Speaking of Something Wicked This Way Comes, something connected to me in a really specific way. So it says, I marked my place and put the book on the floor. I was pretty sure Will and Jim would survive their adventures, but I guessed they would never be so innocent again. Kids shouldn't have to face terrible things. I knew that from experience. And for this, like, this really crystallized to me one of the things I have not stopped thinking about this book, and I've brought up in every episode because I have not stopped thinking about it, is this fascinating choice that King made to make Charlie a 17-year-old man, essentially, at least on the cusp of manhood. And here again is another example of this. The characters in Something Wicked This Way Comes are 13-year-old. They're in that loss of innocence zone, right? That 11 to 13 zone that King really loved to operate in so many of stories like this. But again, Charlie isn't that. And more than that, not only is he 17, this is not a story of loss of innocence, right? Charlie, his mother was killed in a brutal car crash. His father came maybe days away from drinking himself to death. His journey through the story cannot, by definition, be a story of innocence lost because that's already happened to him. He's already there. He's been forced to grow up quickly to realize what the world is, and then even more so, he's befriended this other man, Mr. Bowditch, who has also died. It's too late for this to be a story of loss of innocence, but every story like this story is typically a story of loss of innocence, and so it becomes this really fascinating like puzzle of like, what are we doing here? I'm really, really into this, and I don't have an answer yet, but I just keep thinking about it.
I definitely have some thoughts, although I obviously still can't say that I'm certain about anything. But I just wanted to note, first of all, like we also established that Charlie has been making out with the girls for some time, apparently. So like we established he's a young man. He's not a boy. He's not a kid. He's a young man.
Mhm.
Um, and there's really no sort of frontier of innocence left to him. I think. I think that's actually one of the reasons why we established that. By the way, is like that he is not an innocent. um, but kind of another thing clicked for me while I was thinking about this question that you posed, because I was gonna say something maybe like, perhaps this fairy tale adventure will make him like a child again,
Mm.
spiritually renew him and restore his innocence and kind of give him a chance to have the childhood that he was denied, as a sort of inversion of the typical loss of
Mm.
innocence story, sort of a restoration of innocence. And then I remembered that this is a story that has a literal de-aging device. And I was like, okay, that seems really intentional. I'm not necessarily saying that Charlie is going to get on the sundial and be de-aged. He may, I could totally see that happening actually. But I do think that it's somewhat safe to say that this is the thematic direction we're going in. We're sort of like innocence has already been lost. Can you retrieve it, or
Yeah.
should you perhaps want to retrieve it? That to me feels like something that we're trying to talk about with this story.
I love this. I love this so much. I think you're onto something here for sure. And I'm paying a lot of special attention to that because again, these are like fairy tales are stories quote unquote meant for children, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's going into the world of perhaps the world of origin for these stories. And so what will that experience do to a person like Charlie?
Mm-hmm.
I like this. I like this a lot. I'm really into this.
Yeah, let's see.
Yeah. Charlie briefly considers telling his father about the secret world, but the rules of these type of stories basically forbid that, and he decides that in order to keep the secret, he can't tell anyone. I don't want to like overreact to this. Like we have had like a thing in King stories of like keeping secrets being generally a bad thing. We talked about this, I think, in the first episode, but I just want to reinforce it here. I just really feel like this is how these stories operate. Now I'm saying this, and I'm also realizing that we're being like absolutely pummeled with Charlie's father death flags. So I don't know. Maybe this actually is a horrible mistake he's making by not including his father in the stuff that he's learned. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. It's. I feel like he's gonna regret it, sort of whether or not it's his fault, because that's just his nature. Um, but I don't know what else he would have done differently. I mean, he could have told his father, "Hey, there's a magical land," right? But
Yeah, he could have done that. That would have gone
yeah,
over really well.
right. It's this is one of those like what would you do if you actually for real knew that there was a vampire locked in your basement, and like how would you convince your friend of this fact without them thinking you were crazy, sort of scenario where it's like, Dad,
Mm-hmm.
there's actually for real a well that goes down to another world. Like, how do you? I honestly always think this is a fun thing to think about because it's like there's no answer, right? You'd have to get the person to trust you enough that you could show them or show them some kind of evidence, and I think maybe Charlie feels like he's on a timetable. um I don't know. I'm not nitpicking anything here. It's just I'm trying to think through like what would I do anything differently? And especially as like a 17-year-old, I probably wouldn't do anything differently.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to kind of say like, "Oh, you should tell your dad," but yeah, I think the realistic thing here is like, how the hell? Like, this is a thing that none of us have ever had to deal with. So, what is the correct move here? I have no idea. He decides not to tell him though. He takes Radar back up to Bowditch's house and starts cleaning the house up. And Matt, the part where like Radar is clearly looking for and missing Bowditch just absolutely breaks my heart. This poor dog. I love this dog. I don't know. We haven't said it enough. I love this dog. I am fully committed to the make Radar young and happy again plan. Fully committed.
Yeah, we didn't get much Radar content last week. I think we remarked on that. So It's always good to have some radar. Radar is sort of the heart of the book.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So while cleaning up, Charlie finds the other book that Bowditch was reading, The Origins of Fantasy and Its Place in the World Matrix. Again, Matt, this is a fictional book. It doesn't exist, so there's not much like we can pick at here outside of what the novel specifically tells us. And we have this section here. So far as I could make out, the author of that particular chapter was saying that there were actually two Beanstalk stories, the bloodthirsty original and the sanitized version kids got in mom-approved little golden books and the feature-length cartoon. The bloodthirsty original bifurcated, there's one of your $5 words, into two mythic streams, one dark and one light. The dark one had to do with the joys of plunder and murder, as in Jack chopping down the beanstalk and the giant getting smooshed. The light one had to do with what the writer called the epistemology of Wittgensteinian religious beliefs. And if you know what that one means, even with its headlights on, you're a better man than me. So Matt, I used Chat GPT. We have to use the AI tools that we have, and I did it because I did not know what Wittgensteinian religious belief was, or the epistemology of said religious belief. This was obviously a Austrian philosopher. I don't know if you know this guy at all, Matt. I did not, so I have a very cursory understanding of who he is.
I have like one little molecule of information about Wittgenstein, but why don't you can you tell us what the hell the epistemology of Wittgensteinian religious belief might mean?
So Wittgenstein was very, very into language and the way we use language, and the way language is often not rational, but more like, or factual, but more a way of conveying meaning and belief outside of like the literal. And he was also a man who was pretty conflicted about religion. I think he had changing opinions about religion, and he also liked to study like how we use religion and religious like traditions and wording. Again, not as a specific literal rational belief in something, but more of a larger like examination of kind of broad like understandings of how the world works. I don't fully understand it. I think the thing that is important here is not actually if you understand Wittgenstein and his philosophy, but this concept, this multi-layered concept. We have this thing that I think we hit a couple times this week's reading, is the idea that there are two versions of fairy tales, right? There is the sanitized version that most of us know about, and there's the deeper, darker, meaner version that is at the actual original story. But I think what's interesting about this is that also there appears to be, in that deeper, darker original story, kind of two separate streams of thought around them, right? And they are fitting for us in the Stephen King universe, light and dark, right? Good and bad. Like what is a positive view of the story is kind of I don't know how Jack and the Beanstalk talks about religious belief necessarily, but perhaps like a higher calling, a higher power, et cetera, versus like this guy's a piece of shit that just like stealing shit. It's pretty fascinating. I don't know. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I have very little certainty in any of these. I'm not even going to call these interpretations. I'm going to call them thoughts, because I don't know that they actually conclude anywhere. But you know, the only thing that I understand about Wittgenstein is that he thinks of language as a kind of game that we all play together. And so in that sense, you can think of fairy tales, not just Jack and the Beanstalk, but all fairy tales as a sort of like conceptual sandbox where we play these language games or these meaning games together, and we posit fantastical elements that we know aren't true, but we all sort of play along. And it allows us to really explore the space of meaning and morality in a way that we normally never get to outside of a religious context. So I guess I can kind of see how it's like we're speaking in this world of morals and right and wrong in a way that is typically seen as the provision of religion. So I kind of see a connection there. But you know, I think there's a heavy moral dimension to all fairy tales, like the idea that Jack is going to be rewarded for killing the giant and you know, freeing the harp woman or whatever it is. I told you I forget the details.
I think that's right.
Yeah,
Like there's the captured harp woman. Like all of the giant stuff is plundered, right? Is not his. Like there is a certain moral justification that we're told here in the story that yes, Jack is stealing things, but he's stealing them from a thief. And so that's just righteousness and judgment being dealt out. I mean, that's another kind of specifically religious concept too, right? That Jack, sorry, Jack, yeah, Jack is in this instance perhaps like the hand of the white coming down and punishing the wicked, by chopping him and by beanstalking him and taking his stuff back.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And just I guess this is an aside from the main Wittgenstein conversation, but I was thinking here about the fact that Bowditch's story, like setting aside Charlie, Bowditch's story might be sort of a version of the Jack and the Beanstalk story, where because so when I looked up Jack and the Beanstalk, which is the thing I had to do, the first thing that he does is he steals gold, and then he later steals the other things. And I'm like, well, maybe Bowditch stole the gold and then never came back for the magic harp and the golden goose. And because he's I don't necessarily want to call him a coward because he's dealing with like incredibly dangerous evil magic, but he chickened out. He didn't go back, up the beanstalk / down the well. He contented himself with his stolen gold, and he boarded up the beanstalk, as it were, and kind of abandoned his duty halfway through the fairy tale.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of feels right to me about Bowditch's story.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. Like we've gotten little hints of this too as we've gone through the readings. This idea that um, a thing happened here in this land, and Bowditch kind of bailed and hasn't been back, and things are getting worse and suffering. So yeah, it's you're right. It's almost as if the fairy tale is half complete, that we haven't finished the story yet, and it's going to take Charlie coming in to perhaps finish that story.
Yeah, I think so.
So we head with Charlie to school as he begins laying down his excuses to get out of class for the next few days. He also heads to the library to read up on fairy tales. And Matt, we started talking about the meta nature of this book a week ago. I think we were kind of predicting the direction King was going in, but I think he makes it very textual here, and I'd like to dive into it here. Again, it should not surprise us at all that Stephen King has a book that he names Fairy Tale would not just be a book that has a fairy tale in it, but a book that in a sort of meta nature examines the very idea and concept of fairy tales, right? Not just in that the characters are going to directly talk about stories that they are going to end up in, but also the fact that like they're seeing the story form around them. Like I love this. Like once my mind started down that path, I saw similarities everywhere. My mother had died on a bridge spanning the little Rumple River. And what about the little man with the funny voice? Wasn't that how the story described Rumpelstiltskin? And then there was me. How many stories of make-believe feature a young hero like Jack on a quest in a fantastic land? Or take The Wizard of Oz, where the tornado lifted the little girl out of Kansas and into a world of witches and munchkins. I wasn't Dorothy, and Radar wasn't Toto, but close enough. And like the book introduces the idea that this is just blue car syndrome, just coincidence. Once you start seeing a blue car, thinking about a blue car, you'll see it everywhere. But we're in a Stephen King book, Matt, so I think we can safely say, nah, it's not that.
Yeah, it feels more like 19, where
Yeah.
you're seeing these associations because the universe is presenting them to you to signal you, I guess.
I guess the main question here, though, is to what end, right? What are we doing with this, right? Like, okay, so we're going to examine the concept of fairy tales. We're going to kind of define in the story what a fairy tale story is and put our character in a fairy tale story while allowing him to know that he's in a fairy tale story. But what is that going to ultimately accomplish? And we don't know the answer to that yet. But do you have any guesses at this point?
Well, I just the first thought comes to mind is that like if he thinks of himself as being in a fairy tale, then he'll think maybe think a little bit more laterally in certain situations, like the problem solving part of him that will be used will be like, well, what would happen in a fairy tale, and how would a fairy tale character get out of the situation, which may be the right call in the situations that he's about to get into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I like that. I like that, and we'll see where that goes for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I want to say on this, Matt, is I'm kind of mad we went with Leprechaun instead of Rumpelstiltskin, because in retrospect, that just seems very obvious.
I guess I still, I mean, I feel like there were a lot of Leprechaun associations too. I think the other thing I'm realizing is how many stories involve like a little fey creature and gold. Like there's a lot of stories that have that element. So
very true.
But yes, you're right. Obviously, it was not a leprechaun.
This is one of those things that going back to my comment at the beginning of the show, I feel like if I was reading this at 10 or 11 or 12, I probably would have jumped on Rumpelstiltskin first. But just because like I was just so closer to that story being a presence in my life, or I haven't thought about Rumpelstiltskin in a long time. And so that didn't pop in my head first. Obviously, I think about leprechauns constantly, but not Rumpelstiltskin.
Yeah, that Rumpelstiltskin was another one where obviously I literally forgot what the story actually was, and I think I earlier this week was like, was there gold in Rumpelstiltskin? And you were like, yes. So anyway, yeah.
I actually do want to kind of spend a brief moment to talk about like Charlie. In this moment, he is sitting in class thinking about fairy tales and his life and how his life is a fairy tale. And King chooses to set this during a class at school called America Today, which I've never heard of that being a high school course, but perhaps times are different these days. The basic topic of the course today is the police shootings of Philando Castile and Alton Sterling. And part of this, Matt, I think is just, this is what King was thinking about in 2020 when he sat down to write this book, because like in 2020, on top of the pandemic, there was also the murder of George Floyd, and that triggering like nationwide protesting against police violence. And definitely something that was on his mind as he was writing this book. And so it probably like snuck its way in to the book, as things that are on King's mind when he's writing often do. I think the other famous example of this is the kind of the abortion conversation happening in the early 90s and how that made its way into Insomnia. But I started thinking like, okay, but what else could this be doing? Is there something deeper and more complicated going on here? After all, like when we think about it, contrasting America today and what's going on in the world today with fairy tales, like what are fairy stories for? Like what is their function, especially in today's world? What do you think?
I mean, the funny thing is I don't know, like, which is kind of wild to say. Because like if we return to Jack and the Beanstalk for a second, like the moral seems to be that if a guy has really cool stuff and he's mean, then it's okay to rob and murder him. I don't even like, maybe the giant is in some sense an aggressor who stole this stuff in the first place, and maybe that's like morally relevant here. Maybe that's a morally relevant dimension. But you could also just like, if you stand back from the story, it's like the giant has this stuff in his house. A man is entitled to defend his home. But we tell the story to children as if it's like Jack is the hero for breaking into the guy's house, stealing his stuff. The guy chases him, kills the guy. And I'm like, who would write this story? Why would they write this story? Why do we continue to tell this story, presumably hundreds of years later? I don't actually know. Like what? Like, and that's weird. Like it's weird to be like, well, I gotta tell my children the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. It's like, what am I trying to teach them with the story of Jack and the Beanstalk? What moral am I trying to import to communicate? I don't know. Do you have an answer to this? Because like by asking me, that you're making me realize that I just like this blind spot in my mind.
No, it's very funny because like the part that I think is most like relevant for Jack and the Beanstalk, or the thing that's talked about in culture so much, is the concept of the idiot kid who trades a cow for magic beans, and like the almost lesson of why would you do something that's stupid, but then it's like, actually, surprise, it was the right thing to do. Yeah, I mean, this is so confusing because you also look at a story like Rumpelstiltskin and you're like, okay, what's like the moral of Rumpelstiltskin? So in the story of Rumpelstiltskin, this woman is a king. It hears that this woman can turn straw into gold She, of course, cannot do that, but he kidnaps her and throws her in a tower and says, turn all this straw into gold, and if you don't, I'll kill you. And she's like, oh. And then this little fey creature comes and says, I can do it, but you have to give me some stuff. And it eventually escalates to him saying, I can do it, but you have to give me your firstborn child. She agrees to this arrangement and then eventually has a firstborn child. Rumpelstiltskin comes and says, okay, give me what I'm owed now. And she's like, no. And then she finds out his name, and in I guess some version of the story, he rips himself in half in anger. And they're like, okay, so like, what's the lesson here, kids? Like, what do we learn? Keep your promises, or don't keep your promises.
Yeah, it's okay to manipulate and lie if it's for a good reason, I guess. Yeah, like it's very like there's a very sort of like realpolitik element to fairy tales that doesn't usually exist in like religion, where we try to make things cleaner and more black and white. Like I see why these stories are kind of entrancing to children specifically, because as a child, you're always like your whole universe is this moral maze where you're desperately trying to figure out like what am I going to get in trouble for? What what is this weird concept of good versus bad that I'm expected to adhere to without actually knowing what it is? And fairy tales seem to have a lot of this sort of content, or at least sort of be a space for a child to grapple with some of these ideas.
Yeah. It's really interesting because like fairy tales in like the Grimm's fairy tales variety and what like Tolkien talks about when he talks about fairy stories, I think are actually very different things.
Mhm.
Because like Tolkien's essay on fairy stories is like all about, these are stories about gaining perspective on our world, like stories about fae help us discover deeper truths about people and humanity in our world. They're also forms of escapism, but that doesn't really align with necessarily like what like Grimm's fairy tales, like the stories we think of when we think about fairy tales. And again, this is a book not called Fairy Story. This is a book called Fairy Tale, right? So it almost like we talked about Tolkien in the very first episode, but it almost like doesn't align here. Or maybe King is trying to take the fairy tales that we all know and refit them into Tolkien's broader definition of what a fairy story is. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting because you're right, and it makes me realize like maybe I haven't even read the fairy stories that Tolkien is talking about, because I think I just conflated the whole field of fairy tales and fairy stories into one thing. And I think you're absolutely right that Tolkien would probably not consider Jack and the Beanstalk to be a fairy story, or maybe he would. I don't actually know. Like it's
Yeah.
I'm not sure, and that strikes me as a sort of thing I need to figure out to make sense of not only this book but also maybe make sense of what Tolkien was actually saying.
Yeah. I don't know. I think ultimately, like the reason why I like this, and the reason I liked the idea of the same thing with all kind of genre fiction we talk about, this idea of these type of stories helping us get a deeper understanding of humanity and the world that we operate in. And so part of me wonders if what King is doing here by setting this in a world where characters are in the background talking about police violence, the authority hurting people, are we going to be doing something in the world of Fae with that? I mean, we seem to be set up to do that, right? Because we're entering a world in which the castle, the city, is filled with dangerous guards. The princess has been kicked out and is now a goose girl hanging out at a farm. So like things are set up to maybe shed broader light on that commentary. Just not totally sure exactly what it means yet.
Yeah. So I guess maybe we should see where things go.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, kind of lost in his own world as he exits the class, Charlie bumps into Arnetta Freeman, and we get this, Matt. She says, "Hey, you want to come over and study?" She means make out. And he says he can't, and she says, "Oh, poo." Which, speaking of kids not sounding like kids, I don't know. I have, granted, I have not been around teenagers in a while, but I find it very hard to believe a 17-year-old girl would say, "Oh, poo." But anyway, she says, "That's a shame." She hugged 2 books tenderly to her breasts. "I could Wednesday night, if you're not busy, that is." She brightened. "That would be fantastic." She took my hand and placed it on her waist. "I'll quiz you on Polonius, and maybe you can check out my Fortinbras." So the only reason I pulled this, Matt, was I just want to say, if a woman had done a Shakespeare pun to me when I was a 17-year-old boy, I would have instantly fallen in love with her and married her and been with her forever.
Yeah, I mean, the most amazing thing about Charlie's character and his mindset in this moment is that this incident doesn't completely dominate his thinking for the entire rest of the story. That he actually continues on with his fantastical adventure instead of just being like, gotta marry this girl.
Yeah, I do want to check out those Fortinbras. Yeah. You're right. He's incredible. He's inhuman.
He's very strange and unusual. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So Matt, Charlie says goodbye to his father, and just before his dad leaves, Charlie stops him, rolls down the window, and gives him a kiss. And we get this: "I just love you. That's all." "Same here, Charlie." He patted my cheek, backed into the street, and took off towards the goddamn bridge. I watched him go until he was out of sight. I guess that, deep down, I knew something. God damn it.
Yeah.
God damn it.
He's dead.
He's dead. He drives on the death bridge and out of the story. He's fucking dead, man.
I wonder, so since we agree that he's dead, I wonder if we can be more specific. Like, is it like one of his, friends at his retreat is drinking and driving and like that's how he's killed, and or am I being too sort of straightforward with the with this narrative element, do you think?
Yeah, I feel like we've gotten several beats of that they're going to be climbing trees in this thing, so I can definitely see accident involving falling out of a tree as a thing. I feel like we've also gotten several beats about, yes, people are going to be drinking. Yes, definitely. I think it would be almost too cruel to have him fall off the wagon and like drink and something happens. So I don't think that's going to be it, but I think it would be a cruel twist of fate if it's an accident involving alcohol in which he was completely sober. Also, there is also like the possibility that like he just gets home, sees the note from Charlie, goes looking for him, and runs into Christopher Polly, and that's how it goes down. I don't know, but I feel like Jack and the Beanstalk him falling out of a tree would be cruelly thematically fitting.
Yes, giant falling out of the tree for sure. I am now convinced that that's more likely. Alcohol, I even as I was suggesting that alcohol would be involved, it's like that's just a little too pat. It's a little too obvious. Like that's why I said it, obviously. But it's like, okay, but that no, I think you're just right. It's just going to be an accident. Yeah,
and they're going to be desperately trying to get a hold of him, but his phone is off because it doesn't work.
Yeah,
and it's fucking awful. I mean, I guess the question is here though, like, so do you think like the rest of his time in the novel is going to be spent in Empis? Like, is this going to be a thing where I asked the same question about time traveling in 11/22/63, and the difference was I knew the answer in that book. But do you think he's going to pop back and forth a few more times before the end of the novel? Or do you think this is going to be a get back to the Shire only to find his father dead moment?
I guess I want him to go have a fairy tale adventure. And I guess I'm just trying to work backwards from like, are there any narrative elements that need to be dealt with purely in the real world? And I can't really think of any other than, like you just mentioned, the deal with his father, which is something that can be sort of left till the end. So I think my guess would be that we spend, most of this stretch of the novel just in Empis. Do you have a thought? You have an opinion?
I think that's probably right. I mean, I think we kind of did the thing where we're going to get to it in a second, where he steps his toes in and spends an hour or so down there and then comes back for his journey. So it would feel weird for him to just bail out now and then come back again later. Not that that's not impossible, but I think you're right. Like, he's going to make his journey to the city. I'm guessing, I'm going to guess based on how many times people have said, don't go to the city at night, that he's going to go to the city at nighttime. And bad things are going to happen there. And so I think that's going to be the majority. I think the majority of the rest of the novel is going to take place in or around this Emerald City.
Makes sense. I just have to say, every time we say impasse, it bothers me slightly, because impasse is like a highly obscure technical acronym that I use in my job. And so I'm always just like, why are we talking about impasse? Oh yeah, it's the fantasy land. Got it. So I'm just going to keep calling it Giant Land. Sorry.
It's also a bug.
A bug?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's like a fly. Mosquito fly type thing. I don't know what that means, if that means anything, but it is.
Yeah, never heard of that before. So that's interesting. Didn't know that.
Yeah. All right, Matt. Now, finally, on page 189 of the novel, Charlie finally heads down into the Well of the Worlds and into that other world. And what does he see, Matt? Well, he looks to the far horizon and saw a skyline of a great city. Daylight reflected hazily from its highest towers as if they were made of glass, green glass. I had read The Wizard of Oz and seen the movie, and I knew an emerald city when I saw one. Like, I'm actually super mad at myself for missing the field of red poppies as a specific Wizard of Oz reference, Matt. Like, yes, obviously, like that's straight out of Wizard of Oz. I think I was just like so focused on examining this whole sequence for any Dark Tower Midworld comparisons at the time that I didn't go to the obvious, like, oh yeah, poppies. That's Oz, of course. But here we are, Matt. It's the Emerald City. What's happening?
Well, I mean, there's already an Emerald City in Midworld, so this is definitely Midworld. That's
sure about that?
Yeah, 100%.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Because look, even if it's like King's conception of Midworld is broad, and like, I don't think Midworld is like a place. I think Midworld is like is his Narnia. Like it's just, that's the fantastical world. Things either happen on an Earth or they happen in Midworld. We ultimately found out the territories was part of Midworld, or adjacent to Midworld, or contiguous with Midworld. And I just think that's how he thinks of this. So, like, even if he were to tell me to my face that this is not Midworld, I would just be like, what does that even mean? Like, of course it is. Of course it's Midworld. This is how you've defined it.
I think that's fair. I mean, Midworld is intentionally like hazy. I think you're right. Like, there is so much of the world of the tower and the beams and the places it passes through that we are never told and never see. And it is an amalgamation of story, right? And that is essentially what is happening in this land as well, right? Like, you could definitely see this as just, hell, I think there even like hints of like a beam, like the sky parts at one point. Like, it doesn't come right out and say like it's the path of the beam, but it kinda.
Yeah. I like the idea that the different beams are basically different like subgenres.
Yeah. I think that fits too, because there's literally a beam where Aslan is the beam guardian, right?
Yeah,
like that's the fairy tale beam. Or the fairy story beam, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. I mean, ultimately it doesn't matter, right? I think we're just having fun. Like, it doesn't actually matter. This is its own world, but also Midworld because we say it is. Ha.
Exactly.
So Charlie heads down the road to the cottage that sits in front of him. As he approaches, a woman comes out carrying some shoes. She was an old woman who lived under a shoe, with a lot of shoes.
Yeah.
Tons of shoes.
Yeah.
And Matt, we get our first description of the denizens of this world, and it is an interesting one. I knew she was a woman because she was wearing a pink dress and red shoes, also because generous breasts plumped out of the bodice of the dress. But her skin was slate gray, and her face was cruelly deformed. It was as if her features had been drawn in charcoal, and some bad-tempered deity had rubbed its hand across them, smearing and blurring them almost out of existence. Her eyes were slits, as were her nostrils. Her mouth was a lipless crescent. So this is definitely like not what I expected going into this. But it is very clear that we have, and I think perhaps maybe we make the assumption this first time this is just this woman in particular, but I think we see very quickly that everyone in this world looks like some form of this has, and is some overarching curse on all the people of this land.
Yeah, it's interesting how he uses this metaphor of like some cruel deity had smeared out the charcoal of her features, but I'm for whatever reason that stuck with me as being potentially more than a metaphor, and I was like, is this what happened? Did this Gog Magog like sort of mess with everyone's, I don't know what word to use here, but like interfere with everyone on sort of a fundamental metaphysical level to cause them to all be messed up like this?
Yeah. Yeah, I had the same thought too. I mean, we're specifically told of a deity that has woken, that was sleeping under the city, and some bad stuff happening here. So I think that's a fair logical leap to make.
I also just think it's a very evocative and disturbing image. This woman who is sort of like a vibrant, full-fledged human being, except that her face looks like it was, erased basically. And
her skin is gray. Yeah.
And she has difficulty speaking, as we're going to see.
Mm-hmm. So the old woman who we learned is named Dora, the Explorer.
Definitely.
Maybe?
Mm-hmm.
I actually did a Google search for Dora and shoes, and all that came up on my search was Dora the Explorer themed shoes. So didn't really work out for me. I can't find any Dora in like a fairy tale story, Matt. So maybe I missed it, but I mean, obviously, there's like we're giving reference to the old woman who lives in a shoe, and perhaps what we're doing here actually is the fairy tales that we know are exaggerations or interpretations of these things that we're seeing here in this world. Mm-hmm. Because as we'll talk about in a little bit, the Goose Girl fairy tale is not quite aligned with the Goose Girl we meet in the story.
Yeah.
Anyway, she comforts him despite not being able to talk very well for the reasons you mentioned. She warns him of the danger in the city that he wants to go to. And one thing that happens here that I think is worth talking about, Matt, is as the conversation comes to an end, Charlie prepares to head back, but he realizes that he can't say certain words. Like he wants to ask her what her if a name that she gave it was Bowditch's nickname for her, but he can't say nickname. He also tries to say awesome sauce, and thankfully this world doesn't let anyone say awesome sauce, which makes it a better world than we live in already. But he reasons that what's happening here is that he's speaking a different language and he just doesn't know it, and the world doesn't have like translations for the words he's trying to say in that language, so he just can't say them. I don't know if we see no textual proof that he's right about that, Matt, but I think one thing we can definitely say is that entering this world is transformative to Charlie in some way, right? He is different. He is speaking different. It has certain rules that he must abide under and he has no choice.
Yeah, and I'm like 95% sure that this also happened in the territories and or Midworld. So
you're just gonna keep saying Midworld for the rest of the episode.
Yes. I mean, this has happened before. Is my point.
Yeah, no, I gotcha. So our chapter ends with Charlie heading back up the well, where he finds Rumpelstiltskin with a gun waiting for him.
Not what I thought we were getting into.
No. He says, "I don't want to shoot you, kiddo, and I won't if I get what I came for." And then he added, not as a laugh, but like the words in a book, "Ha." How did the audio book reader do that? I'm curious.
Just like haha, like sort of forced, sort of it came across as like a tick, right? Like
Mhm.
not even that he thinks anything is funny. It's just like a tick that he ends the
Yeah.
sentences with.
I love the description of that, like not like a real laugh, but like words in a book. I
Mhm.
love that so much. It does, like, I was curious how the audiobook reader interpreted that, but it does give a clear kind of imagination of what you're supposed to hear when he says that here. I think it's really
Mhm.
good.
Mhm.
And Matt, from here we move on to chapter 12, Christopher Polly, Spilled Gold, Not So Nice, and Preparations. And at last, we get to meet our good friend, Christopher Polly, who I think we both assumed was someone probably connected to the world that Charlie just left, perhaps coming into our world to get his mislaid gold back. But Matt, it becomes very clear here that Christopher Polly, despite seeming to jump right out of a fairy tale, is just like a funny little guy that has no idea about any of the stuff under the well. He's just like a common thief that heard about Bowditch's gold and wanted it. Or is he?
It's interesting because you're totally right that we started out with one impression. There's just an assumption, really. And then everything he says in this chapter suggests that he's just some normal dude.
Yeah.
But we don't really have an answer, as far as I remember, to like, well, okay, then why does he know about the gold?
He saw it. He saw Heinrich have it.
Okay. For some reason that doesn't sound right to me, but
That's what he says. That's what he
yeah.
says is when asked how he knew he had the gold, he's like, I saw Heinrich had it and I got curious about it and started spying and
Yeah,
eventually.
I think it just seems like a stretch that he would then. I don't know. I guess it's totally implausible. It's not totally unrealistic. Maybe I'm just anchored in my prior expectation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just torn because if it is true that he is just a guy that just so happens to essentially be what Rumpelstiltskin would look like if he existed in our world, like what are we doing with that, right? I think that is saying something really interesting that, like, Charlie has kind of joked around about how the world of fairy tale seems to be running his life, but that seems like it would be a literal manifestation of that is now like his world, our world is being transformed into Fae in front of us if characters like Christopher Polly just exist in it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe so. I mean, I don't think Ka limits itself to operating within the fantastic. I think within the rules of King's greater, way of telling stories, I think it's totally plausible that things in the orbit of Charlie's life will start to look more and more like a fairy tale. I mean, even to the extent of his father imminently dying, right? Is this sort of like the universe contorting itself and making bad things happen so that it makes his life more of a fairy tale?
Yeah. Now, to be fair, we have been told that people from Empis cannot breathe our air and die when they come here. So, for Christopher Polly to be from that world would seemingly break that rule. But
Yeah, that's true. Why does Christopher Polly sound so familiar to me? Why does that name's
the
like?
name,
Yeah,
I don't know.
it sounds like a thing that I should recognize. Every single time I read it, I feel like it's a thing that I should recognize, but I don't. I can't put my finger on it. You're right, though. He's probably not from the other world, although he's just so weird, right?
He is weird, and we're gonna say this by the end of this interaction, but this is not the last time we're gonna see him by a long shot.
Yeah, I agree.
I do like when the book says this. At this point, I'm going to stop most of the ha-ha shit because he said it all the time as kind of a verbal punctuation. Just let me add that it was extremely Rumpelstiltskinish, which is to say, creepy.
Yeah.
I do like these little narrative interludes here. I think it's really good. So Polly forces Charlie back into the house and up to the closet with the safe in it as the boy chastises himself for not being gunslinger enough to protect the burden that Bowditch has asked him to carry. But despite this, or maybe because of the shame he feels, Charlie manages to find his steel in this moment and is able to successfully turn the tables on Polly. He breaks his wrist, by the way. One of two. We'll get to the other one shortly.
Uh-huh.
But at this moment, we get this, and this is, I think, worth talking about, Matt. He says, you might have gotten a pretty good feeling about young Charlie Reed by this point, I'd guess. Sort of like a hero in one of those YA adventure novels. Only, I was also a kid who put firecrackers in mailboxes, blowing up what might have been somebody's important mail. I was the kid who smeared dog shit on the window of Mrs. Dowdy's car and squeezed Elmer glue in the ignition slot of Mrs. Kendrick's old Ford wagon when Bertie and I found it unlocked. I pushed over gravestones. I shoplifted. Bertie Bird was with me on all those expeditions, and it was the Birdman who phoned in the bomb threat, but I didn't stop him. There were other things that I'm not going to tell you about because I'm too ashamed. All I'll say is that we scared some little kids so bad they cried and pissed themselves. Not so nice, right? All right, so we're here again, Matt. We've already talked about this week, and we've talked about this every week, but it keeps being brought up, and it keeps us forcing to consider what's going on here. And once again, this is Charlie not wanting us to think he's a good dude, actually. He's the hero of the story. He's been so far acted like morally upstanding, has done the right thing through and through, is about to be like pushed into the world of fairy and asked to undertake a quest to save the princess. And it seems like he will go on that. But our narrator, which is Charlie in the future, seems really, really, really interested in making sure that we know that he's not so nice, actually. Why, oh, why could that be?
Yeah, it's central, right? It's important. Like we talked about, I think this is one of those times where we're kind of encouraged to step outside of Charlie's narration of his own life and be like, hey, says you, kid, like your standards of behavior are so absurdly high that like you're considering, you're looking back at these mistakes you made as a kid and saying like, see, I'm bad. I'm a bad kid. And it's like, if this litany of crimes and misdeeds was all we knew about Charlie, then that would be, hey, okay, that's that kid, maybe a bit of a delinquent, right? Maybe a bit of a problem child. Got to keep your eye on this kid, but even that, it doesn't mean like, oh, this kid needs to go to prison. Like he's not describing Patrick Hockstetter. He's describing like he's describing one of the Losers Club kids, like what they got up to that summer. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe the Losers Club kids never called in a bomb threat, but like a little bit of light troublemaking does not make you a bad kid who deserves like the level of condemnation that Charlie is levying against himself.
Yeah, and again, it's not good stuff, right? Like, I don't want to say like putting firecrackers in someone's mailbox is good. No, that's bad. But that is the exact kind of like by design, like adolescent troublemaking. Like it's the type of things that if you are bad as a child, they're the kind of, I don't want to say victimless because obviously that's not true, but like much more innocent, like things that get you slapped on the wrist and told, hey, if you don't change your ways, by the time you get to be an adult, you're going to be no good. But like Charlie has changed his ways, right? Obviously he's changed his ways. So like the thing, ultimately, we've talked about this a bunch and I'm sure we'll continue to talk about it, but ultimately where I sit at right now is what I just kind of prefaced this whole conversation with. Future Charlie, the man who is sitting down in front of a computer, presumably typing out this story, thinks that we, the reader, need to know that he's a bad guy, that he's not a good guy. And that, to me, says he's preparing us emotionally for something that's going to happen, for something that he's going to do or not do, or some bad thing that's going to happen or not happen, that Charlie is actively punishing himself for, sitting in the future writing the story out. Like we've been told by Charlie several times that this story has a bad ending, right? Like he's prepped us for that. King has prepped us for that, is that the end of the story is not going to be a good one. And it seems to me like this constant incessant need for him to remind us that, hey, no, I'm a bad kid, is just part of the preparation for that moment.
Yeah. I unfortunately, I think you're right.
But the primary reason here, Matt, for him to have this conversation, the plot reason, is that Charlie in this moment is seriously debating just fucking killing Christopher Polly. He's just like, what am I going to do? I guess I could just kill him and throw him down the well. Fortunately, he decides not to go that route. Instead, all he does is lead him out into the backyard and over the backyard fence. And then, for good measure, he breaks his other wrist. I don't like how much strength. I don't like. I'm trying to think like if I like gave you a handshake right now, if I had the strength, the grip strength to break your wrist. I guess if I just like yanked, right? I just like that seems like something that's difficult to do.
No, I don't. I feel like you have to know how to do that. Like,
okay,
like I mean, so first of all, bones are actually very strong. I mean, they're not magic, but they're quite strong. So like, you've got to have kind of an angle or like a torque, and then the other person has to, not see it coming, so they can't kind of bend with you. Like I don't know. I know. I mean, too far into this, but like think of all the MMA fights that happen where people are just like these monstrous, dudes are like trying to kill each other, and usually don't actually break each other's bones. So to do this, I think the point is Charlie's really strong. Charlie's a big, strong, athletic guy. Christopher Polly's a little pipsqueak, and it's actually a pretty dark and awesome thing to do. To just be like, I think I'm just gonna break your other wrist. I think I'm just gonna make you less of a threat to me in the future by breaking both of your wrists using my giant terrifying strength.
Yeah.
It's like something Roland would do, right? Like I literally totally thought about I thought about Roland specifically because that this actually happens in the beginning of the Gunslinger, where he like shatters a guy's arm sort of effortlessly, and it's like, okay, he's kind of more than human. And I kind of got a little bit of I'm not necessarily saying that Charlie is supernatural, but like it does seem like a little bit more than human to just be able to do this casually.
Yeah, I mean, and it I think it aligns with look, I'm not saying this is like a bad thing that he did. It's not like a good thing, and he shatters this guy's wrists and then kind of leaves him out in the middle of the woods. And is just like, well, I've dealt with that. He won't be able to mess with me anymore because his arms are broken. And it's just like, we just leave him behind and we're like, okay, so he'll be back. Like 100% he'll be back. He's going to fuck things up in some way or another. How, I don't know. Is he going to like force his way into the shed and we're going to find him down in Empis? Who knows? But Christopher Polly's not going away. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So from here, Matt, Charlie begins his preparations to journey to Giant Land for a much longer time this time. His story, as it is to people, is that he's heading to Chicago with a radar to meet a guy who promises to have some mysterious method of restoring vitality to dogs. And look, I know he's working with a limited amount of time, and he's also trying to like set up, if his mission is a success, he's trying to set up the explanation for why Radar is going to come back looking younger and livelier and better. But like, this is ridiculous, right? No one, I just like that. If his dad does not fall to his death on a tree at this insurance retreat, I just have a feeling he's going to come home, read this note and be like, nope, this is a lie. Like, this is 100% a lie. It just doesn't seem very believable, but maybe I'm being too harsh. What do you think?
No, I think you're spot on. I mean, he told, I remember, I forget the exact sequence of events, but he told one of the school people part of this story, and they were like, that doesn't sound true. In so many words. And I agree. This is a stupid, terrible lie that he's going to get if people aren't going to buy. And what's going to happen, I don't actually know. By the way, you just phrasing it as his father's going to fall out of a tree at an insurance adjuster's meeting, I was like, that's totally exactly what's going to happen because of the irony.
No, I don't want it. I love George so much.
Yeah,
don't do this to me, Steven. Like, okay, if the dad dies and the dog dies, we're ending the show early. We're just shutting it all down.
Yeah.
Like we won't finish the book.
Yeah, we'll just that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then we get this part, and I wanted to read this and then talk about it a little bit. I asked myself if I was really going to risk my life and certainly get into a shitload of trouble, both with my dad and at school, for an old dog who had already had, in canine years, a hell of a good run. The answer seemed to be yes, but that wasn't all. It was the wonder of the thing, the mystery of it. I had found another world, for Christ's sake. I wanted to see the city with the green towers and find out if it really was Oz, only with a terrible monster, Gog-Magog, at its heart instead of a humbug projecting his voice from behind the curtain. I wanted to find the sundial and see if it actually did what Mr. Bowditch said it did. And you have to remember, I was 17, a prime age for both adventuring and foolish decisions. But yeah, mostly it was the dog. I loved her, you see, and I didn't want to let her go. So that last sentence is the one that really stuck out to me here. I didn't want to let her go. And we haven't actually talked about this quest from like this perspective, Matt, because like putting aside everything else, is this a good idea? Is the idea of going on a quest to bring your aging dog back to life again, is that like a good idea?
I mean, Stephen King certainly doesn't usually think kindly of people who, want more life, right? Who are sort of greedy for more life. I personally don't have a problem with if there were a way to like magically store my soul inside of a little philaster tree and be like a desiccated lich. Other than that, I would totally do that. Without hesitation. But probably we're meant to think that this is not something that Charlie should be doing, and that sort of gracefully letting go of Radar at the end of her long life is the right thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that in the world, like, didn't he write this whole book about how like sometimes your animal dies and sometimes dead is better?
Rings a bell.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I mean, like it's already been established in universe that like there is a cost that using this thing has a cost to it, and that Bowditch chose not to use it again. He used it once, but chose not to use it again. And there's that. I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but there's that moment with the goose girl where she's like, he chose not to use it. Good for him. And it's like, everyone's telling you this is a bad, but like, actually the problem is like, everyone knows this is a bad idea, but like everyone really loves Radar because who wouldn't? Because Radar is great. And so everyone's just like, yeah, it's probably not a good idea. And there's definitely going to be a cost and consequence of this thing. But like, I do really like that dog. So go for it.
And it's not like Radar is the one who wants it for Radar. It's him sort of wanting it for Radar, which feels a little bit more selfless and good.
Yeah, it does. I mean, the thing I'll say is like we had the conversation with Bowditch last week where he was kind of explaining to Charlie why he wasn't trying too hard to fight against the cancer, and it was basically the story of like I feel like I'm just about good. Like I'm just like I've lived a long life, and he had lived a long life. Like, he had 120 years old, abnormally long life, and he's like, I think I'm just about lifed out, and like maybe Radar feels that way too. Maybe Radar and I don't actually know if we've been told that Radar has already done this as well. That Radar has lived like supernaturally long for a dog. I don't actually know if that's the case. I guess I kind of assumed so, because it like there's also talk about like, oh, he was here a long time ago when Radar was a puppy. And I was like, okay, well, like,
so
for
like
dogs,
18
that's
years.
yeah.
Right.
So maybe, I mean, like, it does seem like if Radar could talk and you could ask Radar, would you say, hey, do you want to be young again and live again? Maybe the answer to that is no, but we're going to do it anyway because he wants it.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, I'm just like the dog would be like, what is time? What is young?
Okay, yeah, no, yeah. Fair. I'm personifying a dog. Right. Yes, but
no, but it's to the like, just to kind of try to take it more seriously, like it's probably painful for a dog for its masters to grow old and die.
Hmm.
Like that's strikes me as unnatural, as if there's something natural about the existence of dogs. um I don't know, it's a fun thought. I don't know, I think here's the thing. We would all do this if we had a beloved dog who
Yeah.
was old and we had the opportunity to de-age the dog. We would all do it. So it's in a sense valid for us to moralize about whether he should or should not do this. I think within the frame of the narrative, it's probably something he shouldn't do, but also we would totally all do this.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Let me be clear so people don't think I'm like moralizing here. I have a 13-year-old Siberian Husky. The average life expectancy of Siberian Huskies is 12 years. So my dog is very old. She is not moving that well anymore. I don't think she can see that well when she navigates like rooms in my house. She goes along the perimeter, and I think it's just because she can't see very well, and she uses the wall as like a way to navigate the room. If you told me I could take my dog to a magical place and set her down, and she could be a young dog again, yeah, I mean,
mhm.
without a doubt, no hesitation, every single time I would do it. But yeah, I think we can acknowledge that, and also at the same time be like, I think the lesson is probably going to be here that this is not the correct thing to do, actually.
Yeah,
But we'll see.
we'll see.
All right, chapter 13, calling Andy. Radar decides Stu Googer.
Good
All
gear.
right, Matt. It's finally time for us to go on our great grand adventure. Charlie finishes the last of his preparation. He packs lightly and even recruits his friend Andy to come over and lock the shed door behind him. Like obviously he could probably very easily like kick the door down when he comes back, but there is something very like final to that act, right? Like
Mhm.
he's going down there, he's going to move these boards over him as he goes, the magazines to kind of hide the well, and he's going to have his friend come and lock the door. So there's no getting in, but also it's going to make getting out much more difficult, and like symbolically that's him like committing himself to this place, which is I think a big deal.
Yeah, I assume his friend is going to unlock the door later. I mean,
No,
it,
I mean, how would he? I mean, I guess he could. Guess he could like get up the well and then call him and be like, "Hey, remember that shed I told you to lock? Could you come back and unlock it? I'm not inside. Don't look inside."
yeah, it seems strange. I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
I think
Uh,
his literal plan for his return trip was just he was gonna like kick the door down,
oh, okay.
um,
Okay.
which he has like super arm breaky strength, so I
Yeah,
assume he could just do that.
that's true. He's a gunslinger. I will say the whole bringing the old dog down the rickety, winding, uneven stairs
Uh
bit
huh.
was actually extremely intense for me.
I love that whole sequence of like Radar's uncertainty. He's kind of like slowly trying to lead her to the well, and she's uncertain, but then the second she finds out that they're going down the well, she's like ecstatic,
Mhm.
and excited, and yeah, navigates the steps flawlessly. I agree with you, very nerve-wracking, but very happy that nothing bad, there was no real set piece with the well stairs there.
Right.
So they return to the world, and Radar seems very, very happy, especially when she sees Dora. She almost like goes back to puppy form a bit and jumps on her and kisses her, and they're so happy to see each other. And man, I just want to repeat that I really love dogs. I really love dogs. Dogs are
Me
great.
too. I love him.
So Dora takes them both in and feeds them. The stew that they eat, Matt, is described as the best I've ever eaten by Charlie. And I think that's really interesting because I know you're pretty convinced of things, Matt, but if there's one thing that I don't think Midworld is known for, it's good tasting stews.
This is, it's a lost art, only retained over in this part of the world. So,
Well, I
you know,
mean, my point of this is actually that like Midworld is a world that has moved on, right?
mhm.
Like society has collapsed, people are hanging on, the land is rotting, the animals are mutated and malformed. That is not what we're seeing here. Yes, there is a curse, there is the gray skinned people, with damaged features, but the world itself seems doing all right. There's this beautiful field of poppies. There's animals, like giant versions of animals everywhere that apparently taste really, really delicious. Giant rabbit is good, apparently. This world is not described similarly. Now, to be fair to what you said earlier, Midworld is pretty inconsistent depending on what part of it you're in. So this could just be a different part and abide by different rules.
Yeah, I think we've been like consistently inconsistent with the way time works in Midworld, where it's like, when was Roland born, right? Like, was he born in 1950 or was he born in like 1200? No one knows. There's no answer to that question because I think the story willfully has like disconnected the idea of time from like, when did Midworld move on? It's like, well, probably different times at different parts of Midworld.
Yeah.
So this could, this could just be a part where it hasn't.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. I also just like your explanation that like we could call this Midworld and it operates in this mystical, magical land that doesn't have to have consistency from one location to the next. Like it doesn't have to follow those rules at all.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about this as well. So the text here says, she nodded and made a grating, gurgling sound. I realized she was laughing or trying to, and it made me sad. The same way I feel when I saw someone blind or a person in a wheelchair who was never going to walk again. Most people like that don't want pity. They cope with their disabilities, help others, live good lives. They're brave. I get all that. Yet it seemed to me, maybe because everything in my personal system was working 5 by 5, that there was something mean about having to deal with such things, out of whack and unfair. I thought of a girl I went to elementary school with, Georgina Womack. She had a huge strawberry birthmark on one cheek. Georgina was a cheerful little thing, smart as a whip, and most kids treated her decently. Bertie Bird used to trade lunchbox stuff with her. I thought she would make her way in life, but I was sorry she had to look at that mark on her face in the mirror every day. It wasn't her fault, and it wasn't Dora's fault that her laugh, which should have been beautiful and free, sounded like an ill-tempered growl. So what's your reaction to this whole thing, Matt? I think this feels important to me.
Yeah, I don't have much to say here. I think one thing this paragraph makes me think about is the idea of fairness and justice and the question of like, is the universe fair? Should we expect it to be fair? Or is it all in some sense arbitrary and meaningless and nobody's keeping score? It reminds me a bit of the various theodicy discussions we've had at various times. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of where I was at too. This idea of as Charlie, as if we look at, I think that mentioning theodicy is so great there, because if we look at our conversation about Jack and the Beanstalk and how you can view that story in a good lens as Jack being like an agent of the whites, administering justice for wrongs done, then this to me seems to be positing Charlie as that kind of same presence, right? This guy that is going to go into a place and see and not offer pity, but rather like righteousness in a kind of way. Like, this is wrong. It's not fair. It shouldn't be this way. And if someone had the power to make it that way, I'm going to do that. And it's setting Charlie up, I think, to go on this quest, to go on this mission. And I think it is pretty important. And I do like it as another kind of, this is why, like, why Charlie, the world asks. Well, this is one of the reasons why Charlie.
Yeah. Because he's someone who sees unfairness and it bothers him and he wants to set it right. Or if he can't set it right, find some kind of justice.
Yep. So Dora says that Radar needs to sleep and suggests that Charlie go and see the Goo Gear, sending him down the road in the opposite direction from the Emerald City. Before he goes, she gives him 3 shoe tokens. And I didn't know what this meant at the time, but I was like, I just remember reading this earlier this week and going like, oh my God, this is the most fairy tale thing in the world. Go on your quest down the road, but here, take these 3 magical tokens with you. I love it so much.
Yeah, I keep thinking, other than the, old woman who lives in the shoe connection that you made earlier, like what is
Mhm.
the meaning of shoes? Like what is the symbolic meaning of shoes? I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like feet are symbolically like very meaningful, and like the tender care of a person's feet. Like Jesus washing a feet, like that was a
Hmm.
big deal. Like your feet are very important. Healthy feet are very important, and shoes are the thing that protects your foot, the thing that keeps your foot safe. And so like the care and treatment of shoes and shoes as a like the motherly thing is providing shoes, right? I think that all feels right with Dora here. But
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Giving care. I like that. Also, I guess like it's something that you need when you're going to go on a journey and you're going to
yeah.
travel.
Hmm. Yeah, and maybe part of this is we can see as Charlie leaves, he sees the message written by Bowditch on the signboard, which says, "Give to me your broken shoes, for down the road you'll find ones new. If you place your trust in me, lucky will your journey be." So this is the message that he wrote, kind of telling people, hand off your dirty old shoes to this woman; she will repair them, and then down the road you'll get a new pair. So it's a thing of, I mean, the essential thing here is that kindness repays kindness, right?
Hmm.
And so visit, like, donate this now, give this woman the shoes off your feet, and you will be repaid handsomely later.
Yeah. It's sort of a pay it forward
Yeah.
system.
Hmm.
Also, I just had to pick at this poem that Bowditch wrote because it's a really interesting statement to say, place your trust in me, written by a man who, according to him, abandoned this place.
Hmm.
Now I know he's sort of speaking in her voice here, but he's the one who wrote it. So
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that. You kind of wonder if we're ever going to see exactly why, like what, I mean, I assume we'll see like what made him say, I want to get the hell out of here. But
mhm.
like, these people love him, right? I mean, that's one like Dora, the Goose Girl, like they feel very fondly about him. They love him, and they love him still, is the interesting part, right? Like he framed it as, I abandoned these people to their fate, and he carried this horrible amount of guilt with it. You would figure, or you would be safe to assume, that perhaps they harbor a little bit resentment towards that action too. But no one we've seen so far does, right? We've met two people that live in this world that know him very well, and none of them had said, "Oh yeah, that asshole, he left us to our fate here." So I don't want to read too much into that, but I did kind of clock that as I was reading.
Me too. Me too. I don't know. This feels tied to it for me, but did you also get the sense that like time is kind of weird because like for whatever reason, I got the sense from Bowditch that he hadn't been back here in like decades.
Yeah.
But these people are all like the Goose Girl doesn't seem like she's 70 years old.
Hmm.
Um and she almost doesn't act like this happened 50 years ago. She acts like this happened relatively recently, but it's really hard to say because we don't really get firm indicators of when various things happened. So I just wondered if you felt kind of the same way I do.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a very common trope in these stories is the time in the fairy world passes differently than time in our world.
Hmm.
But also, it does feel to me that like these characters, even if time is passing similarly, these characters are not aging
Hmm.
or experiencing time in the same way, because like, I don't know what's going on with this princess, but she talks about how she's been doing this thing with feeding herself from this tube through her mouth for like a long, long, long time. And
Hmm.
she's also described as someone that looks very young. So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem to all match up. So, yeah, there's some wonky stuff going on here with time. Part of me is like desperately grabbing for this because like, oh no, what's going to happen is time in here moves way faster. So like when Charlie gets back, it's like only 2 minutes is going to have gone by, just like an 11/2/22/63, and his dad will still be fine, and then he can say hi dad and give him a big hug and say he loves
Uh-huh.
him, and nothing bad will happen at all.
Right. Totally.
But yeah, no, I think I'm clocking the same thing you are, that there's some time shenanigans happening here.
Yeah. I don't know if we're going to get clarity on that. It's just something that I noticed.
Mhm. So Charlie begins to walk down the road, eventually finding a farm, and out front, a beautiful young woman feeding a bunch of geese. The Googier, the goose girl. And Matt, she doesn't have a mouth. She has no mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Not just a deformed mouth, but no mouth. Just a small scar where a mouth should be.
And in this case, it felt kind of intentional, as if someone were trying to silence her to me.
Yes. Yeah. So the goose girl calls over an old horse, and she starts talking through the horse, Matt. She starts talking through the horse.
As you do.
And are you doing this thing that I'm doing where like every new thing you find in this world, you're immediately running to Google to see if this is an existing fairy tale that exists? Because I'm doing this and I'm driving myself insane with it. But this one is, as it happens, actually a real fairy tale.
Didn't know that. I mean, I haven't been doing every new thing, but I have been doing it somewhat. I will say I apparently don't know nearly as many fairy tales as I thought I did. Like, if you asked me, like, what percentage of the fairy tales do you know? I would be like, oh, most of them. And it's like, no, of course not. First of all, idiot.
Yeah.
There's got to be tons of them that you've never even heard of. This being one of them. I mean, is there anything interesting or specific about the Goose Girl story that we should know?
A little bit. So the Goose Girl story is about a princess that is sent away by her mother to hide, I guess, from something. She is accompanied by a servant and her horse can talk. She has a mouth. There's no mouthlessness in the story at all. But basically something that her servant like gets the upper hand on her and like forces her to switch clothes with her. So the servant becomes the princess and the princess becomes the servant, and she is sworn on threat to never tell that she's actually the princess, that she just can't tell. So I think maybe that's like where the symbolically the no mouth thing is, that she's like, she can't talk about the truth. And she as a servant is end up made to tend the geese. In the fairy tale, her horse dies and its head gets chopped off and put above her her house, and then it feels bad for her. Eventually, like basically the way that the fairy tale resolves is the king hears about this is going on, and he goes to the goose girl and says, tell me your story. And she can't do it. So he instead goes, okay, well, why don't you tell the story to the stove and then I'll listen. And then for some reason that is allowed because she's talking to the stove, not the king. And so the king overhears it, recognizes her as the princess, restores the title of princess to her. And in some versions of the story, the evil maid that took over is like horribly murdered. Because that's how fairy tales do. So there's like bits and pieces of truth here. The name of the horse is the same as the name of the horse in the fairy tale. The princess being forced to be a goose girl instead of a princess lines up with it. I don't know how much these other parts are gonna play, and if there's gonna be like an equivalent of the servant character that has taken over her rightful throne, maybe. So it's there.
Cool. Thanks for filling us in.
Mm-hmm. All right, so chapter 14, our final chapter of the week. Leia and Falada help her, a meeting on the road, Wolfie's 2 moons. So Charlie's conversation with Goose Girl begins the way you'd probably expect, which is with Charlie saying, I love this girl. So he doesn't care about Fortinbras over there, but this girl, he instantly loves her. The thing I love about this, Matt, is I think it's like pretty textually like a young boy's love for an older woman that he could never have. Like there's nothing like, there's not going to be a love story between Leia and Charlie here, right? It's just like, and to your point about how perhaps this is a story about recapturing childhood and childhood innocence, it is the kind of crush that a little boy would have on like their babysitter, right? Where it's just like, I love her. And it's because she's the only woman in my life that's not my mom. So I love her. There's something very childish about it, I think.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, bringing up the idea of a mom is interesting. I mean, he definitely is expressing that he feels like, in love with her.
Yes. Yes.
But also like the fact that she's like this poised sort of, I he compares her to Princess Leia for obvious reasons, like on two levels, like not just
Yeah.
her name, but like she's kind of like a Princess Leia figure. She's like an exiled leader, right?
Yeah.
That's what Princess Leia is also.
Yep.
But the fact that he is missing a mother figure does make me wonder, like, is this also sort of a surrogate mother? Is that also part of why he feels so drawn to her?
Yeah, could be.
Yeah. I don't know. All I know is Leia is kind of suspicious.
Come on, man.
There's a vibe.
Explain the vibe.
I cannot explain vibes.
So, okay. So
I don't know if she's being entirely honest with our boy.
Okay. Sure. I'll bite. We'll see.
Thanks, man. There's, for some reason, you've inserted a picture of a chocolate bar into the script here.
I saw this in the script and had to just throw a chocolate bar in here for good measure.
Yeah, some listeners will know.
Mm-hmm. You're being ridiculous.
Yeah, I guess.
And yeah, this is the moment where he's talking to Leia here, and she's asking about Bowditch and what happened to him, and he tells her that he's passed away, and she says here he decided against another turn of the sundial. Then, if so, he was wise. And I just would be like, guys, this quest is bad.
Yeah,
let the dog go.
I think
dogs die.
I think ultimately, honestly, I'm sorry, Scott. I think ultimately the dog is going to die, and I think it's going to be a story of Charlie coming to accept the inevitability of these things, and he's going to do some other, good and noble thing. He's going to save the princess, and him and Han are going to get their medals. Not Chewie though, because Chewie is the dog.
Because he's dead. I ultimately think you're correct, but I think it's gonna be like a sad but like okay feeling death. Like, I've talked about this already. We lost one of our dogs this summer. She was like 4 years old and got cancer. It was very unexpected and very sad. We were not ready for it in any way. And that's a certain kind of tragedy. And then I just talked about my other dog who's 13 years old and is probably not going to be around very much longer. And like that's going to be sad, but it's going to be sad on like a completely different level. It's a different kind of sadness. It's a different kind of tragedy. It's a different kind of thing. And I feel like if Radar must die at the end of the story, it is going to be like this, as you're right, this acceptance, this melancholy, but like, thank you for everything you've given me. Thank you for this wonderful life, and letting me be part of it, and not like a tragic, this isn't fair type of death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's what we're gonna do. Like, it would honestly strike me as very surprising and strange if in this book he just successfully de-ages the dog, and then the book ends and the dog is just like hanging out with him. But
yeah,
unlikely.
Mm-hmm. So Charlie tells Leia his full story, and she warns him once again that if he is going to go to the city, he must not go at night. Especially not him, because he is described by her as one of the whole people, which is, I guess, the term they have for people that aren't gray, which is interesting because that implies that there are other people like him here. Because the assumption here is every person is suffering from this curse in some way. I think the exception here is Leia, although like her skin's not gray, but she obviously is. There's the whole mouth thing going on there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with your assessment here.
Mm-hmm. So Charlie tries to understand what's going on here, and he says, "What happened?" I asked. Was it? Her touch wasn't light this time. She slammed her palm against my mouth, hard enough to drive my lips against my teeth. She shook her head. Never say his name, lest you speed his walking. So I'm a little surprised that, I guess I shouldn't be surprised that this is apparently our big bad here is just going to be Gog Magog. Like, he just, like, he this is a very King thing to do in retrospect, that like the story that our character stumbles upon early in the novel gives him a name of this ancient evil. In this case is just the giant from Jack and the Beanstalk. And oops, it turns out in the story you're about to enter, that's just the guy, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we've been led in a very slow and patient way to the point of just being like, oh, this is just Jack and the Beanstalk. Like we're not that wasn't an example. That's actually what we're doing. So it makes sense.
Yeah. Before he leaves, Charlie gets to witness how Leia eats, and man, this is gross. So gross. Just slicing open a little spot on her mouth and shoving a straw of gross looking goop into it. Yuck.
Yeah, it's very, very dark and visceral. Kind of, this is a just a jumping off point for a little sidetrack I wanted to go on.
Let's do it.
I was thinking about. So like we've talked before about how there's a lot of dark stuff that happens in fairy tales. It's one thing people always remark on, like, oh, I can't believe how dark they are. And like, I can't believe we tell these stories to children. They're so dark. And I'm always like, yeah, sort of, but also sort of not, because children can't really visualize or properly imagine most of this stuff anyway. Like, I don't know about you, but I can remember my childhood, I think maybe better than many people. I can remember what it was like to be told some of these stories and to visualize, the tale of Hansel and Gretel. And just like what I was picturing was just very tame and sanitized, because I didn't have a library full of horrible shit in my brain to consult to paint a truly, awful picture. The concepts are dark. The concept of locking a child in a cage and feeding them to plump them up so you can eat them, that's a scary and dark concept. But the visual of it wasn't like gross and visceral and dark and in this way. But I think that's maybe a fun thing the King is doing, is he's like, well, we're doing sort of an elevated sort of a like reinterpretation of a fairy tale, where we're going to think about what this wild stuff would actually look like. We're going to confront you with the physical reality of it.
Yeah, I like that. I think it is one thing to say that this is dark and creepy. It's another to be forced to experience it like this. Yeah. I think there is something visceral and really gross about this, where, yeah, I think a fairy tale version of this, I don't think a kid, I think you're so right about this, that I don't think a kid would process that the same way, because yeah, like the tale of Hansel and Gretel is really dark. So like the freaking Red Riding Hood is really dark. And yet you just kind of, I think kids just process that kind of stuff just so differently. You're right, because they don't have the context for how bad and fucked up it is. So it's just like, oh, it's just a thing. It's whatever. And yeah, man, you're so right about this. I like this a lot.
Yeah. I mean, our concept of darkness is really quite weird. And I don't know. It's very difficult to convey, because the way little child thinks of things is super, super alien compared to like the consensus reality we've all bought into. But just think about the moment when, you're feeding the child chicken while you're like learning, like, chicken says bok bok. And it's like, yes, that's the same thing. We're eating that. We're eating the animal, the cute little white animal that says bok bok. And the child doesn't necessarily think about butchering the chicken, but there is that moment of like, oh, this world is fucked up, actually. This world that I live in, it's a dark place. We're eating the chicken. I don't know.
It's so funny, because I've had these same thoughts, and just like this kind of fear in the back of my head that like my kid is going to be like, hey, wait a minute. But it never happens, because they don't think that way.
Well, if there is a moment of realization, they're just kind of like, oh
yeah,
like,
okay,
like they don't think of it as, oh my God, the
existential. Yeah.
So like that's kind of maybe what I was mostly unsuccessfully trying to say about like the idea of fairy tales being dark, is like the kids don't see the world that way in the first place. They're just like, oh, this is information.
Yeah, no, I think you're right there. All right, so it is revealed here, Matt, that Leah, why do I keep saying Leah? Leia is a princess, and her entire extended family, including 4 sisters, 2 brothers, and both of her parents, have all been killed. It's like a major bummer, dude. So we've been talking about Bowditch and his responsibility for everything that he puts on him in this stuff. And I wonder, Matt, like, do you think the reveal here is going to be that Bowditch had something to do with the bad stuff that happened, the releasing of this curse, the god that awoke, the corruption of the Emerald City, yada yada yada? Like, did he have a part to play in it happening, or was his part merely just like this thing happened and he's like, I'm out, bye?
I mean, I think it probably happened and he failed to stop it. That's I don't think he like caused it. That'd be my guess personally.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you here. I think like him causing it would be like the guilt he would feel about the stuff would be much more specific and acute than just like the kind of vague guilt of I should have done something and I didn't. Rather like it's all of this is my fault. Actually, is a little bit of a different ballgame. So
it's also possible. Right. I think maybe something even happened between visits. You know, like he comes back and it's much worse. But I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe. So as he goes, Charlie is told to head to the house of the Goose Girl's uncle, which is on the way to the Emerald City. It is a day walk from here. With this info, he reasons that it'll be about 6 days total gone to get to the city and back, long enough for Charlie's dad to return and report him missing, long enough for him to worry so much he must drink, which we already talked about. Is it just an unfair thing to put on a kid? Like, it's his dad's responsibility. It's not his. So he's almost ready to just abandon his quest until, and the book says, until that was, the Gray Maid took me by the elbow. So far as I could tell from what remained of her face, she was scared to do that, but her grip was firm nonetheless. She pulled me towards her, stood on tiptoe, and whispered to me in her painful croak, help her. Oh, snap.
Yep.
Here it is, Matt. Here's our call. Here's our call to action. Here's our quest, our actual quest. The quest after the quest.
Yeah, I agree. This is the real quest, right? Like, I think we already articulated this.
Charlie wrestles with what to do here, and like, Matt, I still feel like this eternal life carousel is going to end up being the bad thing. But as we discussed earlier, like, it's not fair that Charlie has to think about my actions and how they will affect my father's ability to stay on the wagon or not. It's just not fair.
Yeah, it sucks pretty bad, actually.
Yeah. But as he's lost in thought on his way back, Charlie happens upon a couple of travelers that are heading towards him and towards the farm that he just left. One of them doesn't have any shoes, and so Charlie does his duty, and he hands the man a shoe token. I love this part here. These people are so scared, right? That you won't hurt us, will you? The young woman asked, but her voice was that of an old woman, not yet a growl like Dora's, but getting there. These people are cursed, I thought, all of them. And it's a slow curse, which might be the worst kind. It's so sad. And I think, to me, it says something that they see Charlie and immediately see him as an enemy at first. And maybe that's because he's whole. So maybe like the villains in the story are the ones that are doing the curse are obviously not suffering from the curse themselves, right? So I think the other people that look like him in this world will be the bad guys. What do you think? That's
a good point. I didn't think of it as being people. I thought of it as being just Gog Magog, to be honest. But sure. if we're gonna play it that way, like maybe the city is full of quote unquote whole people.
Yeah, and Gog Magog has followers, right? He's got a court.
Yeah, he has a court. He has, his. That's just how he keeps control, as he shows them favor at the expense of everyone else. Maybe he's sort of draining everyone's life force, giving it to them in some magical way, something like that.
Yeah. All right. So the couple needs to get going as it gets dark, and the Wolfies will be out soon. Before they go, Charlie asks for the name of this world, and this is where we finally get it, Matt. Empis. We already talked about what this means. It's a bug. I haven't found any other meaning for this word, by the way. Not that there isn't one, but I haven't found it. So that's it.
All right. Cool.
What do you think about the Wolfies? The
It's gonna
Howling Wolves.
100% gonna be Wolf's extended family.
You sure about that? So we're just in the territories then?
No, I'm not actually 100%. But it does strike me as like, okay, there's sort of like they seem like they're more than just wolves. Like they're wolfies, right? They're not just, oh, there are wolves in the forest
Mm-hmm.
because this is, the world, and that happens sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, this is a specific thing, and the idea of them being some kind of werewolf seems quite plausible to me.
Yeah, I mean, we got a double moon, man. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it could be another kind of wolf. I mean, King likes his wolves. There's a whole book called Wolves of the Kala that doesn't have wolves in it at all, but it's a metaphorical kind of wolf.
sure.
So this could also be a metaphorical kind of wolf. But we did hear them howl, which
We
is what made
did.
me think of Wolf's family, Wolf's
But
species, I guess I should say.
yeah, I mean, and there's
Um,
something interesting about the howl too, right? We're setting up a mystery here for sure. Like, because Charlie makes it back to Dora's house, meets with Dora and Radar, spends the night at the house. She takes him outside to show him something. And as the wolves are howling, we see this. The clouds had parted in a long rift. In the river of sky that was revealed, I could see two moons, one bigger than the other. They seemed to race through the void. The big one was very big. I didn't need a telescope to see the craters, valleys, and canyons on its ancient surface. It looked ready to fall on us. Then the rift closed. The wolves stopped howling, and I mean immediately. It was it was as if they had been broadcasting through a giant amplifier, and someone had pulled the plug. So I think that aligns with your understanding of werewolves. Um, I don't know how werewolves fit in, because I don't think that we traditionally see them in fairy tales.
mhm.
Um, but
Mm.
I, I don't dislike it.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with werewolves for now until we see otherwise.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I mean, like, I- the wolf in Little Red Riding Hood is not just like, it's essentially a wolf man, right? It
Mhm.
talks. It so I yeah, sure.
Just historical trivia. I learned at one point that like wolves were actually like this big problem in like medieval Europe. Like wolves were quite antagonistic and would like there was conflict between humans and wolves quite often, which is not something I knew. But I was reading about this the other day.
I
So
guess that explains the number of fairy tales that feature antagonistic wolves in it. Yeah,
yeah,
I like it.
cool.
All right. So as Charlie lies down, he thinks about everything he's learned, kind of reasons out what his next steps are. I really like this though, as he's thinking. He's thinking of the stars in the sky, and he says, "Not stars, I thought stories, an endless number of stories that pour into the funnel and come out in our world, barely changed," which is a good kind of symbol of what I think we're ultimately doing here, right? Like this is what's been set up. This is what's been hinted at. The whole Ray Bradbury might have seen this world and written his story based on it. Like it seems like that's the direction we're
Mhm.
going.
Although I think it's also possible. So I think maybe when we talked about this before, we were thinking maybe Ray Bradbury actually came here, but it's also, I'm starting to lean in the direction of like maybe Ray Bradbury is, hearing the song of Aslan or whatever, um, the song of the Veld, and writing these stories not because he literally had a supernatural experience, but because he's channeling it more metaphysically.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about Tolkien's idea of subcreation, right?
Yeah.
And that is something that King uh, subscribes to. Although I think don't like Tolkien was specifically referring to God. I don't think King is specifically referring to God when he talks about the song of the turtle and things like this. But just this idea that the stories of the world come from the world and are channeled through you, is something that I think aligns with a lot of this. So yeah, I think you're onto something there.
Cool.
All right, Matt, that is the end of the chapter as our hero closes his eyes and ponders what he's going to do tomorrow. I love the moment where, as he slept, Radar comes across the room and lays down next to him and keeps him warm in the night. It's a beautiful boy and his dog. I love it.
Yep. Love it.
All right, that is the reading for this week. Next week, we will continue with chapters 15 through 18 of the novel. You think he's going to get to the Emerald City by the end of chapter 18, Matt? What do you think? What do you think happens next?
I think we get to the Emerald City. I think we might have to encounter these wolfies and figure out what's going on there. I think that's a mystery we're going to get into. Might actually turn out to be helpers in the end.
Interesting.
I like the idea that like this is a story, that this is a world that operates by fairy tale rules, and so his ability to sort of make deals and use wordplay and stuff is going to be more relevant than just like, can he fight better than the other guys?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that's fair reasoning. I think I feel like we're probably not going to get to the Emerald City by the end of next week. We're definitely going to get to the uncle's house, and he's going to learn some important information that recontextualizes some stuff there. I don't know. At some point things are going to go bad for him. I don't know if they're going to go bad when he gets to the city or before he gets to the city. I'm not sure, but at some point he's going to encounter the minions of Gog Magog, and it's going to go bad.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so that is it for the reading. We have some discussion questions to quickly talk about here, Matt. What was our question last week?
Our question was, what is your favorite old man befriends a kid and then dies, leaving him all his wealth, but also his responsibility story?
Or as you called, your favorite Great Expectation.
Yeah. Of course, no one actually referenced Great Expectations.
Disappointing.
But that's okay. And of course, there are like a million of these, so we have a lot of options. So first of all, from Darian Tyros, we got the first thing that comes to mind for me when I hear the question. I guess doesn't technically work because Bruce is still alive, but Batman Beyond has a young Terry McGinnis being reluctantly accepted by a 70-year-old curmudgeonly Bruce Wayne as his successor to his entire Batman operation. Honestly, the relationship between Bruce and Terry maps decently well onto the relationship between Charlie and Howard so far. Kid meets old man who needs help, drops everything to help him. Old man has a huge secret that the kid later takes on. Bruce even has a dog. I think in this instance, the death of the old man isn't as important. The kid still takes on the old man's entire past life. Did you watch Batman Beyond?
I did.
Yeah, me too.
I did. Came out in 1999. That was what I was looking up while you were talking.
Yeah.
It was like the perfect right age for kind of a modern teen Batman for me to be into. I liked that show a lot.
I did too, and I liked that it was. I believe it was James Conroy as Batman.
Yeah.
Again, which is just like exactly what I needed.
It felt. I believe you mean Kevin Conroy, but
Kevin Conroy. Sorry.
It felt like, therefore, it was just literally like the continuation from the animated series Batman that I watched incessantly and loved so much as a kid.
Yeah, I agree.
That I will never forget. That is the first thing I watched on the TV when we moved to Texas. Like we were in the new house, my parents were unpacking. I was 7 years old and in the way. And so my mom set up the TV upstairs in our new game room, which is like the first time we had a game room in my house. I couldn't believe it. Like a whole room for games. Wow. She set up the TV in there, turned on the TV, and it was Batman, the animated series. And for some reason, that memory is stuck in my brain. I love that show, and I love this show too.
Yeah. Those police blimps with their spotlights filled the screen, and that was it for old Scott.
Yep. That was it. Yep. Never been the same. All right, Para Jane says Bilbo and Frodo, of course. Not sure I need to elaborate on that. So Bilbo, Frodo.
It's great.
That is, that is perfect, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Das Gunslinger says, I'm going with Luke Skywalker inheriting Yoda's mantle as Grand Master, as well as his lightsaber and Jedi knowledge. Obviously, Yoda wasn't materially rich, but rich in knowledge, which greatly helped Luke in his future as a Jedi. Yeah,
good answer. I like it.
Yeah, he became the Grand Master of the Jedi Order and lived happily ever after.
I'm not being baited. I'm not being baited into this. I refuse.
Good.
I'm never talking about The Last Jedi ever again. Ever again.
All right.
Okay, Row 2024 says, my answer is coming from another King story, specifically Mr. Harrigan's phone. In the story, a young boy named Craig is hired by Mr. Harrigan to read to him because his eyes are getting bad. Mr. Harrigan is seen by most of the other residents of the town as a wealthy recluse, but Craig gets to see the lighter side of him. Unfortunately, though, Mr. Harrigan passes away, but not before Craig gives him an iPhone. After Mr. Harrigan's funeral, Craig calls Mr. Harrigan's phone and leaves a voicemail saying that he wishes he was still alive. And that is when the calls start. Matt, you had never read the story, but we did watch the movie adaptation of this for another Levels of the Tower episode.
Yeah, we enjoyed talking about it. I feel like it was one of those movies where it was like so close to coming together and being really good that it just made me crazy, because I was like, why did you not do it like this way? And but I enjoyed that. Enjoyed talking about that. That was a good episode.
Honestly, because we were talking about Stephen King, it was like the thing I was thinking about when we asked this question.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I like the short story a fair bit. Yeah, I'm with you on the movie. The movie frustrated me.
Cool. Baby, can you dig your Sam says, they just talked about Back to the Future, so they will leave out Marty and Doc. So how about a little love for Ben Kenobi and Luke's relationship? As a child of the 70s and 80s, that was the most pivotal relationship between the greatest generation and a Generation Xer, followed closely by Mr. Miyagi and Danielson. Of course, Mr. Miyagi doesn't die, so the win goes to Obi-Wan. Let's see, on a related note, I've been thoroughly enjoying the boomer shenanigans of Steve Martin and Martin Short against Selena Gomez's Millennial in Only Murders in the Building.
Oh my God. I love that show so much. I love that show.
I haven't watched it. I do. I like the tack here taken where maybe Can You Dig Your Sam is emphasizing the generational aspect of these things, where not only is it just like old person passing the torch to young person, it's like, well, old like people of different generations have sort of different attitudes and dispositions, and that is material in the stories in which these events occur. I'm just glad that was emphasized here. I appreciate that. Yeah,
I think there's nothing more boomer than Obi-Wan's line, "What I told you was true from a certain point of view."
It's great. Oh.
Luigi Gamer 333 says, for this week's question, my mind immediately goes to Harry Potter as a kid who inherits not only a huge vault full of gold, but is also the boy who lived. Having everyone know who you are before you even know the world of witches and wizards existing must be a hell of a thing to come to terms with, let alone realizing eventually that you are the sole person who can save the world from the evil that made you an orphan to begin with. Yeah, that's a good answer on multiple levels, because obviously it's his mother and father, but then we do have an old man. Is it a spoiler anymore?
Well, no, probably not. But yeah. I think we all just know what you mean by that. So
yeah,
right. Busy Dad 82 says Giant Land. I believe explicitly making fun of me.
No, so, no way. No, who would do that? Not me.
No, I know. They go on to say, I'm not sure if they ever really became friends, but Charlie Bucket did inherit an entire factory from a sadistic child trapping chocolatier who may or may not have been enslaving the Oompa Loompas. That's totally a valid one. I mean, I got the impression that, at least in the books, so I read the second book too, and
I never have. No,
there's like more of an actual. I mean, they're all just silly and goofy and funny, so it's not like there's a ton of pathos actually. But I did feel like there was more of a relationship developed between those two characters in the second book.
Sure, I'll take your word for it. Yeah. I don't know. Never read it.
Yeah.
Miguel 1976 says, I had so many answers pop in my head it made Joseph Campbell spit in his grave. I'll go with another Charlie as Lieutenant Colonel Frank Slade. I like the twist that Frank doesn't turn into a Force ghost after being struck down by a lightsaber, or guides the hero as a younger version of himself after being gunned down by terrorists. What?
So apparently this is a reference to Scent of a Woman.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I got it.
I don't recognize any of these names, so I provided this context for you.
I appreciate that. I wouldn't have gotten there myself, but yeah, I understand now. Okay.
Cool. Yeah, I think I've seen this movie, but not super familiar with it. Good answer. Moist Scratch 2857 says, I can't help thinking of Charlie Bucket being selected as an adequate and honest caretaker for the chocolate factory. That was the first few chapters of Fairy Tale. Now we move on to Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. I mean, Charlie and the Deep Stone Well. That's funny. Yeah.
Obi-Wan Martinez says, Worf, son of Moog, inherited his father's false blames for being a traitor to the Klingon Empire in collaboration with the Romulans. This curse hangs over him in Star Trek The Next Generation until he teams up with his long-lost brother Kurn and his bestie Captain Picard to unmask the evil Duras clan as the true Romulan operatives. And they'd have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you meddling Federation kids. Any Star Trek answer is a good answer in my book.
Yeah, I agree. I was never clear on why did Worf actually believe his father was a traitor until the information was revealed.
I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
Enough.
This question always nagged at me, honestly, and I don't actually know that I know the answer. So as soon as we're done talking, I'm gonna go look it up on Next Generation website.com.
Next Generation website.com. I've got bad news for you, Matt.
Oh no.
Doesn't appear to be real.
How will I find it then?
You can buy nextgenerationwebsite.com.
Hell yeah.
I like how it's not even the Next Generation website. It's just nextgenerationwebsite.com. It's about to be the biggest repository for Star Trek facts in the history of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is great. This is great news.
Thank you, everyone who sent those questions in. Those were really enjoyable. I really, really liked them. We got another, I think, fun one for you this week, right, Matt?
Yeah. Short and to the point. This week's question is, what's your favorite curse? And we don't mean like shit.
Yeah, like don't just say fuck.
Yeah,
because that's lame.
Yeah.
Like a curse, like is in this story. There's a lot of curses in fairy tales, but there's a lot of curses in other things as well. My favorite curse, Matt, is the Beauty and the Beast curse because it's really mean. His servants didn't do anything.
Yeah, you saw the Beauty and the Beast live action movie, right? You remember the scene when all of the furniture is like heartbreakingly saying goodbye to each other as they believe they are permanently shifting into being lifeless furniture at the end of the movie?
I do.
Yeah.
It's pretty fucked up.
It's great.
I mean, it's so fitting the fairy tale though that the servants are punished for the masters. Like it's just perfect to that kind of story. But yeah. So you could pick that answer. You could pick a bunch of other things.
Yeah. Awesome.
What's your favorite curse?
What's your favorite curse?
All right, folks, that is it for us this week. Next week, we will continue Fairy Tale with chapters 15 through 18.
Yeah. Remember, you can reach us via email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com or over on Twitter at kingslingerspod. And of course, the subreddit at reddit.com/r/doofmedia is the best place to answer that discussion question, or just hang out or share a picture of something.
Of what, Matt?
For example, your cool new Doof Media mug that you have purchased.
Holy shit, look at that transition. Look, but because before you can share your cool new Doof Media mug that you've just purchased, you're going to have to purchase it, which you can do at doofmedia.myshopify.com. There is a ton of stuff there. And you, person who just purchased the If You Podcast Me, Then Podcast Me mug just today, I see you. I'm talking to you specifically right now. Thank you. And there's lots of cool stuff there, folks. I'm drinking out of a Kingslingers mug right now.
Sweet.
So please please check it out. And if you like any of that stuff or want to memorialize this podcast as it comes to an end with a bunch of cool stuff that you can put around your house, that's the place to get it.
And stuff tastes better when it comes out of a Kingslingers mug too.
I can confirm 9 out of 10 scientists agree, actually.
That's right. And if you like any of our other shows over on our website, doofmedia.com, please consider donating to our Patreon account, patreon.com/doofmedia.
Yeah, we've got tons of bonus stuff on there, Matt. We're going to be wrapping up Castle Rock here pretty soon. I think you have finished the last 2 episodes. I am still working on them, and then we'll record, and that'll be released next month. So,
yeah,
great time to hop on board.
Yep.
But of course, if you cannot afford to join us on Patreon right now, that is absolutely okay. You can help us out by sharing this podcast. Continue to share it, please. Even after we're done, please tell people about it. Let them find us, and maybe they'll head on over to the Flaniverse with us as well. You can also help us out by leaving us a rating and review. This week's review comes from L Woods 03, who says, "Literally the best podcast ever. The only podcast I've ever listened to for more than a few weeks. I found Kingslingers when I went looking for a companion to the Dark Tower books, and honestly enjoyed the podcast more than some, not all, of the books." Whoa, no. Take that back. No, the books are better. The books are better. Everyone, the books are better than us, please. I then decided to go through all the episodes while reading the books they cover later. Super bummed the podcast will end before I catch up and listen to in real time. Actually, it's pretty sad it's ending it all. Boo for that. We're not ending. We're just transitioning to a different creator. That's all.
That's right.
We're still going to be podcasting. You're still going to want to listen. You love Stephen King, so you love Mike Flanagan. Trust me on this. You're going to want to make the switch to Flanagan's Wake with us.
Yeah. What? Like it's hard?
That, folks, was a reference to Legally Blonde, in which the character is named Elle Woods, in which this reviewer was a reference to.
That's right. I was frantically trying to find a good pun the entire time you were talking, Scott, and I found one, so...
Did you Google it?
No. Scott, okay. You can see me.
Yeah, but you were typing on that keyboard, Matt.
I was looking up Moog.
Of course you were. Oh my God, on nextgenerationwebsite.com. All right, yeah. Folks. Thank you, Elle Woods, and thank you everyone who leaves those rating and reviews. And please, I know there's a ton of people that are sad this show is coming to an end. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I think it's coming to a transition, and we're very excited about the transition, and we hope you folks are as well. So, but thank you for the reviews, and we've still got a few more episodes to go, so we're not done yet. So we'll see you next week as we cover more fairy tale, long days, and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.